Welcome back, tech friends. My name's Gareth. This is Tech Check. We're back with another PC build. This time we're going all white, specifically designed for high refresh 1440p gaming. So what better than an AMD 7800X3D, Gigabyte Aero 4070 Ti, and then we're going to be putting in this Fractal North case as well. Hopefully you guys will enjoy. If you do, smash that like button, guys. It really helps me out. And if you do like it, smash that subscriber button as well. Build along. Let's go. So as I say, in every PC build, guys, you'll see that I've got rid of everything that I don't actually need. We've got our NVMe's, our RAM, our CPU, and more importantly, our motherboard, because all this is going on here. It's much easier to do it outside the case where you've got plenty more room and more light as well. So the first thing we're going to do is take our motherboard out the anti-static bag and place it on top of our motherboard, where we'll proceed putting in these particular components in there. And I'll walk you through it step by step. So now we've got our motherboard on top of our motherboard box. First step is the installation of our CPU. Before we go ahead and place our CPU into the socket, we need to release the tension on the actual socket itself by undoing the retention arm and then opening up the socket. I would advise just to be very careful at this point, because the actual pins are no longer on the back of this particular CPU. They're now in the socket, just like Intel. All we need to do is match the triangle on the actual CPU with the triangle that's on the socket. And we can do that by just dropping it into place very gently. There we go. Give it a little wiggle. There we go. And then we can fold down the socket and then return the retention arm once we've got it into place. Now, what will happen is this socket cover will pop out. There might be a little bit of crunching as well. Don't worry. There we go. Now, it's a good idea to keep hold of this just in case you want to either sell your motherboard and you've got something that you can actually cover those important pins with. Next up is our RAM, and we're going with this T-Create, and it's 32 gigabytes, 6,000 mega transfers per second. And it's a really good, guys. It's CL30. I actually had to order this from America. And if you're interested in any of these parts, I'll leave a link down in the description where I'll leave some Amazon links which you can click on. Now, for you eagle-eyed viewers, this is non-RGB RAM, and it's really low profile, guys. In actual fact, this is one of the most low profile DDR5 sticks of RAM that you can actually get. Installing our RAM, very straightforward. We've got a little notch in the middle of the DIMM stick. All we need to do is we're going to actually go ahead and install it into slots A2 and B2. So we need to open up our RAM slots. What we can do then is line it up, pop it in one side and then pop it in the other. Even pressure either side until you hear a click. We'll do the exact same for the second stick. Even pressure, nice clicks. Next up is our NVMe's, and these are two 1TB 980 Pros. One's going to be for our operating drive and one's going to be for our games drive. So we're going to install our Gen 4 drive on the top up here. So what we need to do is just undo these two screws and remove our heatsink. We can then just lift that up and out of place. We'll take one of our drives, and I just want to make sure that our standoff is in the correct place. So we can do that by just offering the drive up, and we can see that it's perfect. In order to install this, place our drive at a 20-degree angle and slightly push forward until it slots in. And you'll see that it just bounces up and down. What we have got in here is a quick connect. So if we just bend this round to the side until it slots nicely, and then we can fold it round and that will lock it into position. Much nicer than them tiny little screws. What we need to do then is remove the thermal pad on the back here, or the film off of the thermal pad, like so. And then we can go ahead and replace that heat shield back over our M.2. And there we have it. 30 seconds, guys. We've got our operating drive fully installed. For our second 980, we're going to put it on our second slot down. Again, we can remove the two screws off of the heat shield. Take our drive, just measure it up. The quick connect's perfect, so we can put it at a 20-degree angle, slide it in, and then place it down and fold around the quick connect. We remove the film on the back of our thermal pad and then place our heatsink back in place. And there we have it, guys. In the space of 5 minutes, we've got our CPU nicely seated, our RAM in the correct slots, and then we've got our two M.2s ready to rock and rumble. So, next step is to install our motherboard into that Fractal North case. Ooh, look at that. So there's something very, very nice, guys. Very clean aesthetic when it comes to white cases. And this case is no different. It's got this stunning, and I mean stunning, integration of these oak wood pieces at the front that just really complements the rest of the actual case. Metal and wood, the integration works fantastically well. And I'm surprised that other case manufacturers have not followed suit. Overall, guys, this is a fantastic case, not only from an aesthetical point of view, but also from a temperature point of view and a performance perspective as well. It comes with this full glass side panel. Now, I will point out, guys, if you are getting the glass sided panel, then you don't get the side mount option as well. That only comes with the mesh side panel. So I wanted to make sure that we got the glass one because we've got some really pretty aesthetics or components that are going in here, and we want to actually check them out. So not a bad thing here, but full mesh top panel with having an all-in-one up here is going to be absolutely fantastic. We've got that opportunity to put 3 120mm fans at the front as well. We've got a lovely, and I don't know how much you can see here, I'll take the side panel off when we're building it obviously, but we've got this full PSU shroud as well. And all in all, guys, it's an absolutely stunning case. So enough said. Again, if you're interested, links will be down below in the description. Let's get that motherboard in this case and see how the white and silver contrasts. So we'll take our glass side panel off first so we can get it as safe as possible. The thumb screws are a little tight, so we'll just use a screwdriver just to undo them. They are captive thumb screws as well. And then what we can do is just slide it backwards and pull it towards us. Same for the rear panel. Undo the 2 thumb screws and then just pull it towards you. The top panel is really straightforward. Once you've got the side panels removed, just pull on this leather catch and then our top panel slides out. Likewise for our front panel, you put your fingers just underneath the front, a slight pull, there we go, and then this whole thing pulls out nicely. Taking a closer look inside, you can see that it actually covers our ATX, our micro ATX and our mini ITX motherboards. I don't know how I feel about putting a mini ITX board in here. I think an ATX is perfect. It comes with all of the standoffs required for our ATX, which is perfect. It's got one cutout at the top, which could be very, very tight for those EPS. And not only that, but when we're feeding through all of those cables for our H100, it might be a little bit tight. So what we might have to do is, before we put in our radiator, open our power supply and make sure that we feed through our EPS power cables, just so we don't come unstuck. We've got these 2 lovely grommets down the side, rubber ones, and then at the bottom, again, we've got 3 nice cutouts down there. At the back, we've got a very large cutout for the back of our actual motherboard. So if we're going to install something like an AIO, or where we have to replace the back plate, then we've got plenty of room to do so. Down the sides, loads of room for cable management, and we get these included Velcro straps, which is really nice. And I would say there's a good 2.5 centimeters worth of room for our cable management down here. We've also got this SSD tray as well. Down the bottom, we've actually got 2 hard drive bays that can house our 3.5-inch hard drives. We've got plenty of room for some really large power supplies as well. In terms of front I/O, we get our power switch, we've got our headphone jack, we got our microphone jack, USB 3, 2 of them, and then we've got our USB Type-C as well. In terms of radiator support, you've got a 360 radiator at the front, a 240 radiator at the top, but please be careful of clearance over your VRM and also your clearance with your RAM. And at the back, we can fit either a 120 all-in-one or fans as well. So guys, overall, absolutely stunning case. Love the contrast between grey, white, integration of that front wood panel. It seems to do or has all the answers for everything. But let's see how easy it is to actually build in. So let's get that motherboard installed. So before we actually install our motherboard, you want to make sure that you check that you've got an integrated I/O shield. If you don't, that's the point that you go ahead and install it now, because if you install your motherboard, you're going to have to actually take it back out to install your I/O shield. We're okay, so we'll go ahead. Drop your motherboard into position carefully. Try not to actually scrape the back of your motherboard on all of the standoffs. Just line it up nicely, and you will see here we've got a center pin which drops in really, really well. What we need to do now, guys, is go ahead utilizing the correct screws and make sure that all 9 screw holes are filled. Don't over tighten them. So you don't want to over tighten these screws, guys, just enough for the screws to bite and make a good contact with those particular grounding pins. Worst thing you can do is over tighten it, because you could crack your actual motherboard. I'll tell you what, it's starting to come together. White motherboard, white RAM, white case. Looks beautiful. Let's go ahead. Let's remove those front 2 fans so that we can install our case fans. If you want to get more access to the front panel, guys, you can go ahead and unscrew this screw here, and then we can remove this panel. That'll give us more access to this or these 2 front actual case fans. So all we've got to do is remove the 4 screws in each fan. We can then go ahead, just push the wires out of the side of the case and remove these 2 fans. We're going to be installing these SP120 RGB Elite fans from Corsair. Look really, really nice, and they're also in white. With the RGB, white RGB goes really, really well. So same premise, guys. We've got 3 for the actual front of the case, and we've got 1 that's going in the rear of the case. We're going to replace these exactly how we removed the 2 front fans. The rear one, we're just going to place inside and then screw from outside the case. 4 screws in each one, and we'll wire them up at the end. And there we have it, guys. We've got our front 3 fans nicely set as an intake, and we've got all our cables coming off at the back side. Now let's move on to our all-in-one installation, which is that H100 Elite X XT. Let's get it installed. Before we actually do that, I can foresee some clearance issues with regards to putting the radiator before we put those EPS cables in. Let's open our power supply, quickly get our EPS cables and get them connected and push them through to the back so we don't have to take our radiator out. We just want our 2 EPS connectors, so I can get them connected now. Now, because we're using extension cables, I also need them. These ones are from Abno, and they're 1. And these ones are all in white. Not used these ones before, so interested. Oh, they're pretty nice. Cable cones in white as well. They are nice. I wouldn't say they're as good quality as Cable Mod, but these are half the cost of Cable Mod connectors as well, or cables, guys. So ultimately, going to look the part. As long as they perform well, it doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do is find the 2 EPS connectors, connect these to these, connect them to our EPS connectors, push them through to the back of the case. Let's do it. Really easy to see which ones are for your CPU, guys, because it's the 4 and 4 pins. So the other ones are 6 and 2. So we've got 3 PCIe, a 24 pin, and then 2 of these for our 4+4 pins, which are our EPS. we'll put these ones away. Again, on the back of the actual main cables from the PSU, you'll see this one goes into the PSU, this one goes into the CPU. What we can do then is put the clip and the clip together, push together, and then we've got a really strong connection. If you are using any cable combs, guys, I would only suggest putting one on this particular one because you're hardly going to see it. But what you can do is put them on now before we connect them. We can then just go ahead, guys, and connect that 8-pin. Make sure it is all the way seated. And then all we're going to do is, there's too much excess here, but then once the cable's pulled through, we've got our cable comb on here, and that will look really nice and neat. We'll do the same for the 4-pin. And there we have it, guys. Once we've got our cable comb in place, then it neatens it up and tidies it up really, really nice. It just means that when we get that all in one, we're going to have a lot less room than what we've got here. So it's better to do it now than later and have to take all the radiator and everything out. Now let's move on to our all-in-one installation. So our all-in-one, guys, is this H100 Elite Capalex XT 240mm all-in-one. Comes with the exact same fans as what we've got here. It's going to sync really, really nicely because it's going to be able to power them via that commander core. And ultimately, guys, it's going to be more than enough for this 7800 X3D with its 8 cores and 16 threads. I also think that having that included commander core is a massive bonus because you don't actually have to go out and actually purchase any other RGB hubs or anything like that. All we're going to do, guys, is take all of our bits and bobs out of the actual box itself, and I'll be back very shortly when I'll show you how to actually install it and all of the different brackets, screws and everything that we're going to require. And there we have it, guys. We've got our 2 fans, and because this is the XT version, guys, it doesn't come with the SP Elites. It actually comes with the ML Elites, so slightly more expensive fan, but nevertheless still Corsair, still going to work perfectly fine with this particular commander core. Now you'll see here we've got a fascia plate here, and they've also given us 2 additional fascia plates as well. We can switch and swap them dependent on what the actual aesthetic is like. Pre-installed on the actual pump itself comes with an Intel bracket installed. We're actually going to require the AM4 AM5 one. So when we come to install this, we will actually replace the Intel one with the AMD ones. We've got our 4 standoffs, we've got our 4 thumb screws, and then we have our long screws and our short screws and our washers. So the first thing we want to do, guys, is make sure that we've got our fans orientated the correct way. Essentially what I mean by that is we want to be blowing air through the radiator and exhausting out the top of the case. We also want to make sure that the actual cables are on the closest side to us, because when we pick this up and shove it into the case, the cables are going to be at the back so we can easily cable manage them. Now the easiest thing for this, guys, is to make sure that you only put the outer screws in first and don't tighten them down, because you need a little bit of wiggle room to get them all in. As you can see here, there is a whole plethora of different screws, and we've got 2 size screws. We've got a long one and a short one. Obviously the short one's not going to actually connect the radiator to the actual fan. We're going to require the long one. It goes through the actual fan and then into the radiator. The smaller ones are when we're actually securing the radiator to the top of the actual case. Once you've got all 8 in, you can go ahead and tighten them down. Not too tight, just to make sure that they're not going to vibrate and they aren't going to come loose. Just be mindful that when we take this particular cap off here, we are going to be obviously disturbing this thermal paste if you're not careful. So what we can do is just pull off these Intel brackets, sliding them to the side. We can then go ahead and install our AM4, AM5 ones by just sliding those into position. There we go. And that means now we've got the correct mount for AM4, AM5. But we'll move all this to one side. We'll get our motherboard prepped for the all-in-one installation. So we'll lie down our computer, guys. Make sure that we're not trapping any of the actual cables or anything like that. So I've just tucked them into the back of the actual case. What we're going to do first is we're going to remove this bracket here. We can do that by just removing the 2 screws on either side. Now you don't want to actually throw this bracket away, guys. 2 reasons. First reason, if you're going to be selling your motherboard and you want to upgrade in the future, you need to make sure that you replace the mount. And second reason, if you actually get a different cooler, whether you go air or you get another all-in-one, for instance, it may require this particular mounting mechanism. So it's always good just to keep hold of it, put it back in your box and keep it. Once we've got them removed, these will just lift up like so. And then what we're going to do is take the 4 standoffs that we had previously. And on these standoffs, there's one side that's quite thin and there's one side that's quite thick. Now, the actual thumb screws will go onto the thin side, but they won't go onto the thick side. They won't fit. So it's kind of idiot proof. So what we're looking to do here is take the thick side and screw that into each corner of this particular motherboard. And that's as easy as it gets, guys. As I said previously, what's going to happen, and I can't put it all the way in, but all that's going to happen here is that then is going to sit on each one of those posts, and then we've got 4 thumb screws that's going to go ahead and sit nicely over the top of it, locking it into position, giving the correct mounting pressure as well. Now, if you are getting a 7000 series CPU, you can buy a contact frame that's going to improve that particular contact and give a more even pressure, not to mention, because of the way that the IHSs on these new CPUs, the thermal paste tends to go everywhere. So you'll find yourself taking a lot longer to clean it up if you are re-thermal pasting your CPU. Let's get our all-in-one secured at the top, and then we can turn our attention to actually making the correct contact. Once we've got all our cables nicely through that grommet, we can go ahead with one of the small actual screws, and we're also going to require one of these little washers as well, so that the screw doesn't pull through the actual case. So just put one of the screws in place like so, and then you can go ahead and put one in either corner just to secure it, and then you've got 2 hands to go ahead and screw the remaining 8 screws in. I would advise not to make too much in terms of tightness here, because you want to be able to wiggle the actual radiator up and down just so that you can get all of the screws in the correct places. Once you're happy with regards to the positioning, you can go ahead and tighten down the screws. And there we have it, guys, our 4 and 8 pin EPS. Physically impossible to reach with the radiator installed, so it's a good job that we installed it before we actually installed the radiator. What we're going to do now is go ahead and apply some thermal paste. Now the cooler did come with thermal paste pre-applied to the bottom of this copper heat shield here. I've gone ahead and just removed it due to the fact that I don't know how long it's actually been on there, and I'd like to use some of my own. We're going to be using some MX4. So we're going to put a nice dollop in the middle. Next stop is I'm going to go ahead and connect our fan header for our CPU. That just goes onto our fan header, which is the grey one here. Even though this is a 3-pin, it works absolutely fine. If you don't install this, it means you could potentially have a few issues on startup, guys, saying no CPU fan installed. Now that we've got that installed, we can move that cable to one side because we're going to push that through to the back of the actual case. All we need to do is make sure that each one of these holes here sits on each one of these standoffs. There we go. Once you've got it in position, guys, try to keep it as still as possible. And what we're going to do is go ahead and install each one of these 4 thumb screws. Now I like to take a screwdriver, guys. You can do this with your thumbs, but there's not much wiggle room in here. So I'm just going to start in this corner, a few turns, and then go to the opposite corner and a few turns. And we're going to continue to do that until we get thumb tight. What we need to do now is push this particular cable through to the back of the case. Fantastic bit of kit, guys, but obviously given Corsair's latest developments with regards to Corsair Link, a lot of these products are no longer obviously going to be utilized. So essentially we've got 6 RGB connections and 6 PWM connections. The most important thing here, guys, PWM doesn't really matter in terms of order. As long as it's connected, it'll be absolutely fine. In terms of RGB, it's important that you get fan number 1, 2, all the way through to 6 in the correct order. Not only to make sure that the actual fans and RGB works, but to also make sure in IQ, if you want to actually synchronize it or you want to change a pattern or anything like that, you know exactly which fans corresponding to which actual input here. Really, really straightforward. It's powered by SATA power, and then it's one USB 2 connection to your motherboard. So the first connection we're actually going to do, guys, is from our pump. And that is got a little grey connector there, and we've got a little grey connector there. If you line them up, it'll line up and then just push it straight all the way in. And then that is our pump, fully controllable, powered by this commander core. What we're going to do is install it here with these 2 pieces of 3M tape, and we're going to get this secured in position just here. The next step, guys, is figuring out which order do you want your fans to go. Now, I always have it the front fan at the bottom as number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So all we're going to do is we're going to take RGB fan number 1, which is this one here, and we're going to plug it into RGB number 1. We'll then take RGB fan number 2 and plug that one into number 2, and so on and so forth all the way round to number 6. We can then go ahead and connect all of our PWM connections, whichever one actually is the shortest cable. You can route these however you wish to do so. And that's it, guys. Obviously we've not cable managed it, but the main important thing is you've got fans 1 to 6 in order, and you've got PWM power to all of them fans. You've got your pump connected via that 24 pin at the top, and then when we've got our power supply in and we've got all our other front IO going through to the motherboard, we'll go ahead, connect our USB 2 and provide SATA power to power the commander core. We'll now turn attention back to the power supply so we can get all of that installed, and I'll go through all of the different cables, what we're going to require, and how to actually install the power supply. Really good looking power supply this, guys, and these ATX3 power supplies blow my mind. This is a 1050 watt power supply, tough power GF A3 150, and they're tiny in comparison. I've seen some 650 watt power supplies which are bigger than this. So really, really good, guys. On the front, you've got a 0 or smart fan switch, which is here. We've obviously got to remove this before we start using it. We've got our on and off switch. We can remove some of these as well. But on the back, we've got our 24 pin connections. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 6-pin connections, which are there. We've then got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 CPU or PCIe connections, and then we've also got our 12 volt high power connection, which is there. Nice looking power supply, does exactly what we want, and plenty of room for upgrading if he actually wants it. Fully modular, gold rated, and 10-year warranty. So well done, Thermaltape. We'll put all this away, and then I'll actually show you what cables we're actually going to use, what cables we've already installed, and we'll get this installed. So in terms of cables, guys, we have our 2 EPS cables that we've already connected to our motherboard. So we need to remember that they're connected to our extensions, and then we need to install them into one of these 8 pins. So we've got 2 of them, so they'll go in there. We've got our 24 pin connection, which requires this side to go in here and here. We also require SATA power for our pump and our fans and everything like that. And then we've also got an 8 or 24 pin extension cable here. Now you will notice that there's no PCIe cables. Now this product is from AVA, and this is an angled 12 volt high power cable, and it's a right angle cable as well. So essentially, guys, I wanted to make sure that we've got all those white cables. I wanted a nice white braided cable that had an angled adapter on it, so we could get rid of those black cables. First thing that we want to do is remove our power supply bracket, which is at the back here, we can go ahead and install that bracket onto our particular power supply. So we'll take our 4 screws. All we've got to do is screw this fascia plate into our power supply, and then we can turn our power supply upside down. And the first 2 cables that I'm going to connect, guys, just to make sure, is these 2 EPS cables that we connected previously to the motherboard. Really straightforward. They can go in any of these 6+2 PCIe or CPU connections. So I'm going to put mine in these first 2 connections, which are just here. I'm then going to go ahead and connect my 24-pin connector. And on our 24 pin, you've got these 2 particular cables here. We just need to make sure that they're lined up and they're pushed in all the way. And then the last cable that I've got is my SATA power cable. And that's going to power our commander core and all our fans and our pump. And that can go in any of these connections up the top. For any eagle-eyed viewers, you will notice that I don't have any high power cable or PCIe cables. And that's because I've gone and got myself a right-angled high power cable here. Ultimately, guys, this connection is going to go, and I should have done this one first, but that connection is going to go into here. This will be the last cable I actually connect, but I need to go ahead, put some cable combs on this particular cable. Next step is essentially to push all of these cables through the actual back of the case, like so. Just make sure you've got them all through, like that. And then we want to make sure the fan is facing downwards, and that will slide all the way into there. So we'll go ahead and tighten down our 2 thumb screws, locking our power supply into place. What I'm going to do now, guys, is do quite a lot of cable management, and then we'll come back, we'll do all of our front IO motherboard connections, plus the most important thing, which is our GPU. So a little bit of cable management later, guys, and I will say that whilst there's plenty of room this side, there's absolutely no room this side, especially if you're using cable extensions. The first thing that I need to do is power my Commander Pro. Just make sure that there's a little L there, and we need to make sure that that is lined up so we can push that together, like so. You can push all the excess to the back of the case. We'll turn this over and we'll make all the front IO connections and all the motherboard connections. Our first cable to connect is our 24 pin. We just need to push that in. There we go. That's nicely done, and we can play around with the cables and everything afterwards. The next cable is our USB Type C, and that one is just here. Just be careful with this one. Don't push too hard. If it doesn't go in, it's the wrong way round. There we go. That's our USB Type C. We now need to do our USB Type 3, which is this one here. There's a little notch on the cable. We just need to make sure that that lines up with this little notch here. There we go. And again, we can sort the cables out afterwards. Next cable up is our USB 2. There's a little triangle here, and that indicates where to actually put the connection down there. Another trick is there's a blank here in the corner, and there's a blank down there in the corner. You just need to match those particular blanks up. So we'll put that one in place, and then we'll push the excess through to the back of the case. Next one is our HD audio. That always goes down here in the bottom left hand corner. A trick here is to make sure that the writing's facing upwards when you connect it. We've already connected our 2 EPS power cables for our CPU. That was done before we put the radiator in. And the last to connect is our front power switch and power LEDs. Now they go on these connectors down here, guys. It's very difficult for me to zoom in all the way for you to even get a chance of seeing this. I would really suggest you type in your motherboard name and model into Google and type in JFP1 layout, and it will give you a blown up diagram of where each and every one of these goes. Failing that, nip inside your motherboard manual And again, look for front panel connectors and it will give you an indication of where each actual connector goes on this JFP1. And there we have it, guys. Our last cable to connect is our high voltage power cable. But before we connect that, we need to get our graphics card. And that's the RTX4070 Ti Gigabyte Aero. So let's grab that. This is where the fun starts, guys, because it means that you've nearly done. And this is normally the most expensive component that goes into any PC build, especially if it's a gaming computer. So this is the GeForce RTX 4070 Ti from Gigabyte, and it's their Aero version. We're going to be in keeping with the white theme. So hopefully, let's get this out. Let's get it installed. Oh, that looks very, very nice. I'll turn it around in a second, guys, but you've got this nice silver, which is going to go really nice with that motherboard, and one of the reasons why I picked this particular card. So you've got your pass-through, which is indicative of the 30 and 40 series, guys. You've got this lovely metal silver backplate. Turning it round to the side, we have our Aero Gigabyte signs with our GeForce RTX, and then on the front, we've got this really nice white and silver striped theme, very much like that Asus motherboard as well. We've got a 3-fan design, which again is going to look really, really nice. So next step, guys, is we need to remove slots 2 and slots 3. We're then going to just lift up our all-in-one tubes, and then we're going to nicely drop this into position. Once we've got it all lined up, a firm push until you hear that lovely click. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and replace the 2 screws. We can now go ahead and install high power cable. We can now sort the cables out, push any excess to the back, and we can put it back together, guys. I'll be back with you in the space of a couple of seconds where we'll do a test boot to make sure everything's all set up correctly. We've reached that time, guys. It is absolutely do or die. So, it took me about 3 hours all in all, but I've gone a little bit OTT making sure that everything is absolutely bang on. Also, I thought, or think, shall I say. So, let's turn some power on. Let's make sure it all works. Let's monitor. And please. That's a good sign. Come on. Post. That's a very good sign though. We've got lights on all the fans. They're all spinning. The graphics card's working. And everything looks well. Now, obviously with 7000 series, it does boot. It is a brand new build as well, guys. So I'm expecting it to boot loop a few times as well. White light. Green light. Action. Looks all good. Press yes. Okay, there we go. FTPM is just resetting, and then it will go through to the BIOS. So all in all, guys, I think this is going to be an absolutely tremendous system. It's very well balanced. It's got that 7800 X3D in there, which I think is probably the best gaming chip that you can get at this moment in time. That coupled with like the 13700K. And that coupled with also the RTX 4070 Ti is going to allow you to 1080p absolutely smash it out the park. 1440p smash it to bits as well, and is very 4K capable as well. It's going to be absolutely fine for the next 3-4 years, dependent on what your expectations are. But overall, the case was nice to build in. The only one or two things I would say is the one cutout at the top is an absolute nightmare. It should have 2 or 3. It makes cable management very, very difficult. And also, I told you about the case having 2.5 centimeters worth of depth and loads of room for cable management. Well, it has on that side. On this side, it's an absolute nightmare. I couldn't even get the cable extensions, the connectors to actually fit. The back panel wouldn't go on, I can guarantee that. So I ran the extension cables around the top and then down the side as well. But All being said, it's been an absolute lovely case to build in, with the exception of those things. It looks unreal. And I'll chuck some B-roll in here, guys, right about now whilst I'm talking over it. So I'm hoping that you guys have followed along. If you've got this case, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to know. Again, I think from a visual perspective, absolutely stunning. And yeah, it made me think twice about my Leon Lee XL case. There's quite a few cases coming out at the minute that's really tempting me, but nothing's really pulled me away from that. But what's your guys' thoughts? All white build? What do you think? Did I do a good job? Everything looks absolutely fine. It's picked up our 32 gigs worth of RAM. It's got both of our Samsung SSDs in here as well. We are running a little bit warm at this moment in time. It's running at 42C. Motherboard's running at 25. We need to sort these fan speeds out. We need to download IQ. I need to download the chipset drivers. I need to do all the updates. So for the next hour, I'm going to be disposed of. So I'm hoping you've enjoyed it, guys. If you have, remember to smash that like button. Please, please, please. If you liked it more, subscribe. We've got loads more content coming up, loads more PC builds with all the latest and greatest parts as well. I thank you very much for your time. All the very best. Take care.